Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports, and in today's video we're going to be focused on Myles Turner per request by some of the viewers. And I think it's very interesting right now, the situation that we're playing out in Indiana. It's something that you typically do not see in the NBA. We're actually going to talk about the last time that this happened as well. It's a very unique situation that does not come around often. It has to do with cap space, so it's very important to completely break down why Indiana could potentially still extend Myles Turner and why Myles Turner could still be playing basketball in Indiana next season and going forward. But it's also possible that he could still be traded. So I think this video is one that you have to kind of understand that there's avenues here for Indiana to go either way. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. So let's jump into it. If you do enjoy what you see in this video, please hit that subscribe button. For the video preview, we're going to start by talking about Myles Turner's current contract and some of the league rules that stipulate what his extension would theoretically look like under certain circumstances and under certain conditions. We'll look at those rules on that extension and then how Indies, in an actually really flexible situation, which can change how they operate here with Myles Turner's contract, which makes it a lot more likely that a deal could actually get done between him and Indiana. And then we'll also look at potential extension details for Myles Turner. Supposedly, according to reports and rumors, he's already turned down a contract extension. Because of that, a lot of fans, a lot of Pacers fans specifically, and a lot of fans of other teams as well around the league looking to hopefully trade for Myles Turner are excited about the potential of him just leaving Indiana, making it more and more likely that Indy would trade him. I want to talk about why him reportedly turning down an offer does not mean it's the end of the world for the Indiana Pacers, and how there's still room for a deal to potentially get done between the two sides, which I think is really important to look at. You hear, oh, he turned down an offer, he wants out. That's what everyone thinks. I don't necessarily think it's the same exact thing as what people are kind of assuming all over social media. So let's go ahead and continue by looking at Myles Turner's current contract. Originally, he had signed a 4-year extension with Indiana with his likely cap hit number around $18 million. He does have $2 million of unlikely incentives as well on those contracts. Those have not lived up yet. So his cap hit is $18 million. And it's the final year of that original extension. And for a player who is in his mid-20s, he's been extremely productive for Indiana this year. He is clearly outplaying that $18 million mark, which is why in a normal situation, he would not extend, because due to the league rules, and we're going to see this with some other really important players as well, which is really funny. Right now, they're undergoing CBA discussions, which could completely change the way that these extensions work. Right now, there is a 20% threshold for a raise for a player who's already been extended once, going into his second extension for only a 20% pay raise. And you might be saying, only 20%? I'd love to take that at work. Correct, but at the NBA level, 20% doesn't make up the margin here for a guy like Myles Turner, who, to be honest, is probably worth $26+ million with the way that he's been playing as of late. We're going to see the same issue with Jaylen Brown at some point as well if they do not change it in the current CBA. So it's actually really important for the Boston Celtics that the CBA that is intended to be ratified at some point in February of 2023, it could really shake up what the league's looking like, including this Myles Turner contract, but not significantly. I think Myles Turner's is a little bit safer, but that 20% raise at most would put him at $21.6 million annually in an extension. So there's just no reason for him to take a normal 20% raise because he's outperforming his current contract already. That $21.6 million, which is a $3.6 million year raise every single year. It's just not enough money for him. It just isn't. And because of that, he's not going to take that in a normal situation. But like I said earlier, Indiana is not in a normal situation. For those of you who are starting to learn some of the cap rules, this is a really niche situation that never happens. Indiana has cap space this season. They're actually a pretty good team right now. Part of the reason why they have cap space is they've got a lot of good young players on rookie deals. You look at Halliburton, Benedict Mathurin, Duarte. I know he's been in and out of the lineup this year a little bit. Some of their, good young core is on those cheaper rookie deals, making less than $10 million a year. Because of that, they have a pretty competitive, solid roster, but it's not costing them a ton of money. And remember, it's intentional that I chose to put DeAndre Ayton on here in a Pacers uniform. They had that cap space put away for DeAndre Ayton this offseason when they signed him to a massive offer sheet that Phoenix ultimately had to go out and match. Phoenix, since they matched it, left Indiana with a gapping amount of cap space. Right now they have about $25 million in cap space, and it gives them a lot of flexibility this season, not only for the trade deadline, but also when it comes to some of these contract extensions. Because of this cap space, Indy can offer Myles Turner a renegotiated contract. Again, I want to say this again, a renegotiated contract. We do not see these very often in the NBA. Because of this, the way that this rule works, you need to have cap space. And for those who are wondering about cap space, you might say, oh, well, you want to save the cap space. At the end of the year, you have to pay the league minimum, which is the cap space. You have to pay your whole cap space. And typically what you can do is you can either advance it back to the league. So right now, Indiana has $25 million in cap space. They would either write the league a check for $25 million, or they would separate that $25 million across the 15 players on their roster. So everyone would essentially get a $1.7 million bonus at the end of the year. But since they have Myles Turner in a contract extension year, they could do something completely different. Using this cap space this season, Indiana could bump Myles Turner's current pay this year from $18 million all the way up to $37.1 million, which is a maximum contract level value. It's a massive, massive pay raise, equaling essentially a $19.1 million pay advance for the next deal. You think about it, this year, he's making $18 million. They can over double his current contract for this season, making it very lucrative for Myles Turner to actually consider staying. If he were to get an extra $19 million from this team, I think he'd have to think long and hard about, I kind of maybe want to stay with the Indiana Pacers. Now, one thing that's really interesting, earlier in the season, Myles Turner was talking about how the Lakers should seriously consider trading for him and Buddy Hield. He said that on the Woj pod. I'll try and put that in the video right now.
Would you do the 2 picks?
That's such an intriguing question at that. I think personally, when you look at this business of the league and, knowing the landscape of the league, you have to go off your future, right? And we all know picks are so valuable in this league. And someone like myself, I'm heading into the last year of my deal, and you want to make sure, you're getting a return, for your assets, right? So, if I'm the Lakers, I take a very hard look at this with the position that you're in. I know what I can provide for a team, my leadership, my shot blocking, my 3-point ability, and just my ability to make plays out there on the floor. And I take a very long look at it. But as far as pulling the trigger, that's I get paid to shoot. Now, I'm meant to make these calls, so I couldn't answer that.
But it's something that's very, very interesting for sure, with the fact that, he was kind of shopping himself a little bit on a podcast with Adrian Wojnarowski. Now let's look at those following seasons. They do not have to be at the max contract level. And this is where things get really funky for both Indiana and for Myles Turner. This is where negotiation really has to happen. For example, year 1 of that renegotiated contract would be this season, and they can make that number as high as $37.1 million. But the following years do not have to be at that number. Year 2, for example, could be at $26 million. Year 3 could stay at that $26 million mark, so on and so forth. Now, quick note, I chose $26 million as an arbitrary number, just for the sake of representing what a deal could look like. I have no reporting that $26 million is the number that they have talked about. And $26 million for me is kind of the level I'd be willing to consider paying Myles Turner. That's the reason I chose that number, but it's very possible that they've talked about different numbers, which we'll talk about a little bit later on in this video. The last renegotiated contract in the NBA came all the way back in 2017 with Robert Covington. So we're already 6 years since the final one with Robert Covington renegotiating his contract with the 76ers. You think back to, this was really shortly after Trust the Process. Robert Covington was one of the few players that really stuck with them during that tenure of Trust the Process, where he came in and he actually stuck in the NBA. Because of that, they rewarded him using their cap space to a long-term extension, higher than that 20% league threshold raise that you would talk about. Most players have to go to unrestricted free agency in order to sign a max contract back with their team. Look at what Zach LaVine did this past year with the Chicago Bulls. The league is basically saying, if you want to give your guy a big pay raise, and this is why the CBA needs to be changed, he has to go to unrestricted free agency. It doesn't actually make any sense for retention. If the league wants players to stay in one spot, play for one team for extended periods of time, that rule does not make any sense at all, and it's something that needs to be changed. But we've seen now an instance where in the last 6 years, Robert Covington had to do this with a renegotiated contract, and now potentially Myles Turner could this year as well. So let's get into some of those contract extension specifics. The deadline to sign an extension or that renegotiated contract is March 1st, 2023. So there's a little bit of time here. My guess, Indiana will wait until after the trade deadline to ramp up these extension or renegotiation talks with Myles Turner. And you might be saying, well, why would they wait? Don't they want to get Myles Turner on the books? Don't they want to keep him around? Why wait? Going into the trade deadline, it's very possible that, there's a couple cases here. First of all, Indiana could still consider trading Myles Turner if they get really good value for him. If they give him that extension now, they cannot trade him for the foreseeable future. He basically would be not trade eligible at the trade deadline. But if they wait until after, obviously they can explore all options when it comes to trading Myles Turner and evaluating if that is best for their franchise. And also, they do have that $25 million in cap space. So it's very possible maybe a player they like comes available and they could just absorb a player's contract using cap space at the trade deadline. Again, it's very rare to see teams have sizable amounts of cap space at the deadline. Indiana could be a really big-time dark horse player this trade deadline if they were to make some moves. Even if they trade out Myles Turner, if they were to trade him to a team and they get maybe a $13-14 million contract back, you could see them have roughly $30 million to play with at the trade deadline, which could be big time for them, bringing in guys like maybe Bojan Bogdanovic as an example, Jeremy Grant if Portland does index on that and maybe think that, hey, we could trade him now, get some assets for him. Indiana's kind of in the driver's seat with some of this. For Myles Turner, with the report that he declined an extension offer from the Pacers this season, a lot of people went into panic mode about that immediately and said, oh, they got to trade him. They got to trade him. They got to trade him. I want to talk about why he potentially declined an extension offer. Now, I'm not in the room. I don't exactly know what Indiana offered. Of course, that has not been fully reported, but it's possible that these were, the initial preliminary talks between Indiana and Myles Turner. And it's possible that they maybe lowballed him a little bit or just didn't offer him a great contract. An example of that could be maybe this year they say, hey, we'll give you that big pay raise, but in year 2, you're not going to get, a sizable contract number. You're going to get $19 million. And Myles Turner might say, yeah, no, even with that huge advance, I feel like I'm worth more than that, because in year 2, year 3, if they set that number at $19 million, he would just be better off going in free agency and signing for $27 million a year and saying, look, by year 4, I'll have made more money on that bigger contract with another team than even getting the advance this year. The advance this year gives him more money in his bank account now. It does make some sense financially to do it that way. But at the end of the day, if he's looking at the total value of the contract, something at, $19 million annually after this season is not that great of a number for his play. So again, this is not reporting. I don't fully know what that contract looked like, but it's possible too that Indiana didn't even offer that entire pay raise. It's possible that maybe they offered him $32 million this year instead of 37, and his agent would advise him to not take that then as well, to keep his flexibility open, to keep his options open for free agency. It is possible Myles Turner just does not want to be a Pacer. I'm not going to completely rule that out either. But, I just don't think declining one contract extension offer is like the end all be all of, oh my gosh, we got to trade this guy. These things happen, especially for a player like Myles Turner, who's not an obvious, oh, he's a max level player, let's give it to him. These things take a little bit of time. Sometimes, relationships get broken over discussions like these because the player feels like he's worth more than what the team's willing to offer. And usually both sides have good reasoning for why they feel the way that they feel. So I think this is a tricky situation, a very niche situation we don't see very often in the NBA, but one that I think is going to be very fascinating to watch over the next month here, between the end of January all the way through February. Because if he gets traded on February 9th or before the trade deadline, it'll be very interesting to see what the return looks like, and I think it could really set Indiana up well. But I also think people are going to lose their mind if he's not traded and forget that, hey, there's still work to be done here in these contract extension details, that maybe Indiana's willing to go a little bit further, offer a better contract, and keep Myles Turner on the book. So my final thoughts here on Myles Turner, I would say don't rule out a trade. I don't think that it's completely out of the realm of possibility that Kevin Pritchard ultimately executes a deal around Myles Turner if he says, hey, look, these are some things that, I'm just not sure if we're going to get an extension done, and maybe we just move on. But I also would not rule out an extension. It's possible that those talks were very preliminary, that Myles Turner said, hey, dude, you're going to have to give me my bag. That's a little bit too low. And Indiana maybe say, okay, let's talk a little bit further into the season. Those things happen all the time. So you'd be surprised. Some NBA teams just do not act with urgency about their players. Look at the Dallas Mavericks with Jalen Brunson. Last year, they just did not act with any urgency. Now, sometimes that comes back to bite you like it did the Mavericks. But at the end of the day, I think that Indiana, they're kind of in the driver's seat here. They can decide what their future is on Myles Turner by either giving him a contract that he essentially cannot say no to, with that huge pay advance and a good level, number on years 2 through 5 in that deal. And it's also possible that they just say, hey, look, we're going to trade him, maybe get a first-round pick or two, and really accelerate this rebuild around Tyrese Halliburton. I still think that keeping Buddy Hield makes a lot of sense for this team. He's a phenomenal fit next to Tyrese Halliburton, and I think the Pacers are in a really, really strong position moving forward. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, leave a like. There was a lot of research that went into this one, making sure I had all of these numbers and all this data and actual reporting accurate. I do hope you enjoyed a lot. If you did, also consider subscribing. It helps us out a ton at the channel here. We're nearing 16,000 subscribers, so it would be great for you guys to hit that sub button and get us at least one person closer. Thanks again so much, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.